What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's Tanklebear, Cobra Tech Repair. You get everything tech, news, gaming, and nerd related. And today I'm going to tell you how to repair your computer. This is going to be broken down into 5 different sections. I will list them down in the description below. If you do not want to watch the full video, you can skip to your section that you're having problems with. Now, the sections will be storage problems, where we'll talk about SSD and hard drive issues. USB, where we'll talk about USB drives not working or moving slowly. Then we'll go to video cards, then we'll go to CPUs, networking, and Windows. So, if you want to go to only one of them sections, or you want to watch the whole video, feel free to go down to the description. I'll timestamp everything so you can know where you need to go. Alright, so starting with drive problems. What happens if your hard drive disappears? Well, if your hard drive was previously visible, the first step is to see if the drive shows up in your BIOS. Now, I can't really show that here, because I'd have to shut down the computer and you couldn't see my screen capture, but you go to your BIOS, which most of the time you have to hit F9, F12, whenever your computer's booting up, and go to the options under boot, and see if it shows up there. If not, make sure your SATA and power cables are connected just fine. If you adjust around the computer a little bit, they might have came disconnected. Now, if the drive shows up, then you can run check disk on it by going to your computer. Say this was the drive that disappeared. You right click, go to properties, you go to tools, and you go to check now, and that will automatically check the drive for errors just to make sure everything is okay. Now, if the drive is still giving a ton of errors and it's behaving erratically, like missing chunks of data, copy all the data off of it immediately and move it to data recovery, move it to another drive, because that really means your drive is dying. Now, what if an optical drive disappears? Well, this is usually a registry error. So you can go into registry, type in regedit. That's regedit. This takes you into the registry. Now this might look very, very hard to do because it is kind of way up there in technical specs, but what you have to do is you have to go to H key local machine, expand that out. You then go to system, current control set, control, class, and go right here to the first 4D36E965. You see it says DVD CD-ROM drives. You see something called lower filters or upper filters in here. Delete it and reboot your computer, and your drive will start working again. Now, what if a hard drive is not reporting full capacity? This usually happens with 3 and 4 terabyte hard drives. 2 terabyte drives usually have no problems under Windows 7. Windows XP might have to download a utility, but 3 to 4 terabyte drives are typically called MBR disks, and it limits a partition to 2 terabytes. So the rest is a separate partition. If you want the full capacity on one partition, you need to convert it to GPT. Now, to do this, you go to Command. To go to the command prompt, you type disk part. Now you're in the disk partition software, and then list disk. It shows you all the disks, and you would choose the disk that is the big drive. So let's just say it's disk 1 or disk 0. Now this shows you everything in disk 0. Now you can see here there's GPT. So all you would do is you would type convert GPT, and you would be done in this part. Now from here, you'd have to go to your disk management, just go type in disk management. It's under administrative tools, and you would find the disk. You would right click on it, and you would make a new partition, and you would have your full 3 to 4 terabytes. Now, what if your SSD performance is slow? Well, an SSD should not be slow. If you think it's running slower than spec, download Crystal Disk Mark. I'll link it down in the description. And make sure it is connected to a 6 gigabit SATA port on your motherboard. If you're not sure, look in your motherboard manual or try to find one online, because that is probably why your speeds are slow. Next, we are moving over to USB. Now, what if some USB ports don't work? If the ports are front mounted, make sure your internal cables are connected properly to USB headers and is enabled in the BIOS. Now, to check to see if there's any problems, and go to your device manager. Go to USB, Universal System Bus Controllers, and make sure the USB boot hubs have no problems. If they do, it's probably a driver issue. So you just have to right click and click update drivers. Alright, the next section is video cards. Now, what if your GPU is slow? Well, the first thing to do is make sure your GPU has the current updates. In my case, I use the NVIDIA GeForce Experience. I'll open it right here. And you just click the check for updates button. And it goes through, checks for updates, makes sure everything's just fine and dandy. And that is the first step. Now you can find your driver version easily here, or in the NVIDIA control panel, or the Catalyst Control Center if you're on AMD. Now, if you're having, your drivers are fine, and you're still having issues, then your GPU is probably overheating, and you probably either need to find a better thermal solution or replace the thermal paste yourself. Now, what if Crossfire or a multi-card SLI is not working? Well, it could be just certain games do not like Crossfire. Now, what if you're getting screen corruption and artifacts? Well, I am using MSI Afterburner for my overclocking. And if you're getting artifacting, which is like things popping up on screen or a bunch of screen tearing, make sure your temperatures are good on your GPU. You can see mine's sitting right at 40, which is very, very good. And try to turn down your overclock if it's overclocked. That will take care of any artifacting. Go back to stock speeds. Now, what if you're having display or resolution issues? Well, it's not very common, but if you're running 2560 by 1600, you probably need a dual-link DVI cable, along with a dual-link DVI port on your video card, and DisplayPort also runs at 2560 by 1600, but VGA and single-link DVI do not, so double-check the input source on the monitor. Now, what if you're running two displays and the second display is not recognized? Well, first you want to make sure you're running all the latest drivers. And second, go into the control panel of the drivers to enable the second display. Or you can right click and go to screen resolution. And there is the second. You can see I have my dual DVI 2560 by 1440 display first, and my second is 1920 by 1080. Now I have this to where it is extended. That means it shows whatever's on desktop 1, such as my start bar, moves over to the second, and I can move things over. Or you can copy exactly what's on 1 to 2 or 2 to 1. Or you can have the desktop only on 1 or only on 2. So you just go to detect, it would detect your monitors, and you should be fine there. Alright, next we'll move on to CPU problems. Now, if you're having CPU problems, the first thing I would check is to make sure it is not overheating. Let's go to all my benchmarking software here. Actually, it'd probably be in my... Let's go to all my monitoring software here. And we will go to the CPU ID hardware monitor and core temp. Now you can see my CPU is running at about 40 degrees C, and that's because I am overclocked. But if you're seeing very, very high numbers here, like 60, 70, 80 C, you have some bad problems. If you're running an overclock, you need to clock it back down to stock speeds and remove your thermal paste and clean it, and clean your CPU heat sink. Now, what if your CPU is running slow? Well, first, check your clock speed in CPU ID, or CPU Z, which would be right here, CPU Z. And it would tell you exactly, I don't know what I want to update, what your CPU is running at. You can see mine's running at 4.8 megahertz, but you can see it also in the core temp. So it is running at my overclock. So my CPU is not running slow, but if yours is and you've overclocked, make sure it's actually running at that speed. Now, what if your CPU is unstable? Well, if your computer hangs up a lot or goes blue screens, you need to run an app called Prime 95. What Prime 95 does is you just run a blend test, and it starts running all these workers and pretty much maxes out your CPU. I'm going to stop that so it doesn't freeze up my computer, but it starts a bunch of workers, it runs everything at once, and if your computer fails during that, then you need to lower your core speed on your CPU and make sure your thermal paste and everything is very good. Now, what if your CPU is always under a heavy load, always running at around 100%? Well, the best thing I can tell you to do is download Malwarebytes free and run it. It is usually a virus that is causing your CPU to run at 100% load at all times. Now let's move on to networking problems. What if your internet connection just drops? Well, it's probably your ISP, or your internet service provider. So you need to contact them and let them know to see if they are the issue. If your system connects through a router, then connect the system directly to your modem to see if the router has a problem. And also turn the power off and on the broadband modem just to cycle the power. Unplug it for a few seconds and plug it back in and wait for it to resync with the connection. If that's not it, then call your ISP and let them know. If your file downloads are taking forever, there really isn't much you can do tweak-wise that will significantly speed up or improve internet connection speeds. You might want to try a VPN to make sure your ISP isn't throttling you. Alright, now let's go to Windows problems. What if Windows is freezing? Well, it's probably malware. You need to download Malwarebytes or some kind of antivirus and run it. And if you're overclocking your CPU or GPU, and you don't have any viruses, maybe tone it down just a little bit, and that's what's causing Windows to hang up. What if you're getting the BSOD, the blue screen of death? Well, they're usually beta drivers or driver issues. You can uninstall the drivers, but if you didn't write down the BSOD info, there is something you can download called Who Crashed. And it collects all of your dump information and shows you what all your drivers are, connects all your dump information so you know exactly what happened when your computer crashed. Alright guys, so that's pretty much it for my general how to repair your computer overview. Now, like I said, I will put all the timestamps down in the description down below so that you can find exactly what you're looking for so you don't have to go through the sections you don't want to. This is going to be a fairly long video, and I really don't want you having to watch through a bunch of stuff you don't want to see, so I'll break it down into the 5 sections, and you can watch each section individually. Also, I will try to list the software I used here that I used to monitor and do virus removal so that you can do it all yourself. Alright guys, this has been Colbert Tech Repair with today's, fairly long tech tip, but I hope it helped you guys out. If you liked, give it a like. If you didn't, feel free to give it a dislike. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section right down below. You can find me here on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at TankoBear92, and you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Colbert Tech Repair. See you guys next time.